Hey, and welcome back to the Female Founder World podcast. It's your host, Jasmine Garnsworthy here. And before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to actually recommend another podcast that I think you're going to love. It's called the E-commerce Dropout podcast, and it's hosted by Emily George, who has successfully launched 4 e-commerce businesses herself. And in the podcast, she just shares really useful tips and tricks to help you start and scale your very own online store. So the best part is that she keeps it super real. She breaks everything down in a way that's really easy to understand and implement, which I know all of our listeners, the Female Founder World podcast, you love the actionable tips. So I think you'll be into it. I would suggest getting started with episode 54. That's where she shares the exact step-by-step breakdown that you need to start your own online store for $100. So if you're in the early stages, you have an idea, you don't know how to get it off the ground, I would head to the E-commerce Dropout podcast in the podcast app on Apple or Spotify to get yourself started. Okay, now on to today's episode. We have an interview with the wonderful Emma Bates. She is the founder of a tech company called Diem. They are an app where women and non-binary people can discover wisdom and share what they know via candid conversations. I actually hosted a Diem session a week or so ago that was all about the best tips and learnings that I've had from interviewing more than 60 female founders. So you can go back and listen to that one if you want. It is within the app and you can discover it just by searching my name, Jasmine Garnsworthy. All right, let's get into the episode and learn all about what Emma is building over at Diem. Emma, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go right back to the beginning. I want to understand kind of how your career got started.
Yeah, my background is in marketing and partnerships, and my career sort of started quite unconventionally. I learned how to market by creating a blog when I was 19 years old. I was studying at university and have always been very creative, but was doing a very academic degree, and blogging became my outlet for creativity. I did film photography. I love writing. That's how I learned marketing, was growing an audience really around myself. It grew to 100,000 readers at one point and was kind of insane. I got to travel for free while I was at college. So for anyone that has experienced wanting to travel at college, that's kind of the dream. And then from there, that sort of background put me in a very good position to be hired into marketing. And certainly it was the very early stages of influencer marketing. So I had all manner of different connections of fellow, I guess what they're now called creators in the space. And I started at one of the first creator networks. I was the head of community and built out all of their creator network from 0 to 300. And then I was approached by the co-founders of Away and sort of started there to initially expand their company into the UK. So I'm from there. And then after about 3 months, they moved me to the New York head office, where I did kind of everything. Everything ended up being mainly partnerships focused. So partnerships is my sort of one true love professionally. And I really learned the ropes while I was there, doing all sorts of things from a Star Wars partnership through to, I don't know, we created a pop-up hotel in Paris at one point. So it was like creating a hotel.
Have fun.
I don't know. It was so fun. It was a crazy 3 years. But yeah, joined there in 2016, left in the summer of 2019. So really the hyper growth years of the business. And I guess one of the great things that also came out of it was I met my co-founder Divya while we were both working for Away. And that's kind of where the start of Diem happened.
Okay, there's so much to get into there. I want to go right back to this blog.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, what were you writing about? What were you covering on the blog? And then second, why did you decide not to continue doing it?
Yeah, great questions. Honestly, I don't know why the blog was popular. People I think it was fun to read, obviously, but it was a lot of travel. It was a lot of I love eating. So it was a lot of like restaurant reviews to begin with, and really just like film photography. So it started very central to me going to places or taking photos of things and then not having a place to put them. I didn't want them on Facebook. Instagram wasn't really as big a thing at that point. And so I started just uploading them on Blogspot, I think was the one I started on. And so it was really to house them. And then I started writing around the photos and like what was happening and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, from there it expanded. I actually studied war studies at college. My thesis was written on gender and sexual-based violence, looking at areas of conflict and post-conflict. And I started writing a bit about gender equality and things from the perspective of a privileged 19-year-old. But also just like really relaying what I was learning at school in regards to that in more casual writing.
Interesting. That would have been pretty early on in the blogging days of the internet.
Yeah, it was like 10 years ago.
I remember those days. That's when I first started as a digital editor as well. And I remember like bloggers just kind of getting started. And because I was a digital editor, I was also kind of like lumped in with the bloggers. And I was like, well, I'm actually working for a publication. And no one really understood what to do with people creating content on the internet at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my first brand deal was like £50. And you think about that in the grand scheme of what you can be paid now, it's kind of laughable. It is laughable.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to your second question, one of the reasons I didn't want to continue was I don't really, as much as I know I have to do it for the company now, I don't really like posting about myself. It makes me feel uncomfortable. And I would prefer to do it for companies or for causes or like other people. I love personal branding strategies. I think they're fascinating. So yeah, that's kind of why I made the pivot, as I actually genuinely hate doing it around myself.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. So at what point that you're working it away, like when did you decide that you kind of wanted to start your own thing and go out and do this for yourself? You mentioned that you met your co-founder Divya there. Did you both kind of know you were going to go do this?
No, we definitely didn't while we were still working there. But yeah, I've been asked this question a lot about what our sort of moment was. And I really think that the moment was experiencing the problem myself. So um, the sort of incident that happened was I had to take Plan B for the first time, and I'd never taken it before. I literally had no idea what it was going to do for me. I'd had a history of bad reactions to the birth control pill and had at that point come off of birth control completely, and I didn't like it. Like I was just such bad hormonal reactions, all of that sort of stuff. And so I was really nervous. I was like, what is going to happen if I take this? So I was doing so much Googling. I ended up actually asking basically every single woman that would talk to me in the office whether they had taken it and what their experiences were. And I created this like literal spreadsheet of data, and was like, okay, so what is going to happen is that I'll have a period from anywhere between 3 days and 6 weeks. And obviously it was not very helpful. I ended up having a period for 4 weeks. It was crazy. And so it was just a horrible experience all around. And during that time, I just was thinking constantly, like, why is this happening? Like, why do I not have a place where the information is out there? Why do I not have access to the information? Like, we all have these experiences. Doctors know the answers, yet I can't access any of it. And that's really where Diem came from, was that experience. And then talking to others, talking to Divya, talking to people everyone's had an experience like that, whether it be health, whether it be finance, whether it be negotiating, whatever it is. We're all constantly crowdsourcing our way through the world. And because we live in a society in which our success hasn't been prioritized. So it came from that. And that was when we really started thinking about it properly.
You have the marketing background. What skill set does Divya bring to the table at Diem?
Product and technology. So her background's in building digital product. She's got over 10 years of experience doing that, both for Away. She was super early at ZocDoc. So yeah, she sort of brings the technical expertise to the table.
Before you kind of start building out a product, and I want to get into some of that as well, what documentation are you creating to externalize these conversations that you're having and these thoughts that you're having? What are you putting together in like a really physical sense?
We wrote down a couple of hypotheses, basically, and then user research to test all of them. That was our starting point. Divya's background in product, obviously it's so building products is all about the user voice, user experience, user research. And so we sent out on my Instagram story, just like, it was actually anonymous. At the time, it didn't say that this is the company I was starting, because I didn't want that to affect anyone's opinions. We got 750 replies in like 7 hours. And people were so unbelievably open in what they were replying. And I was like, if you're doing this in a Google form, like, why are you doing this in a Google form? Like, why are you telling us all of this? Like, the reason you're telling us all of this is you don't have another outlet. You don't have a platform or a place where you could share these experiences or ask these questions or explore these parts of yourself. And so that was really validated it. So yeah, started with our own hypotheses, but then was really validated by research.
In a really practical sense, so you kind of putting an ad spend behind, is it like a sponsored Instagram story? Is this just going out directly to your community? How were you kind of getting those 700 responses?
This was literally just my personal Instagram account. I do have tens of thousands of followers, so it definitely helps in the reach.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was no ad spend, no incentive at all. Just people wanted to share. Like, some of the replies we get, I still think about frequently. They were like both harrowing, but also like unbelievable that people wanted to use their experience to help others.
What kind of stuff were people sharing?
Really, really personal health issues. And we had a couple of people literally just because of the environments that they exist within and for no other reason. We had so many people saying things that laddered up to such a severe lack of self-confidence that it was actually heartbreaking. And for no reason, like every other answer that they gave, they were incredibly impressive individuals, and yet they thought so negatively of themselves, largely because of the environments that they exist in versus their own ability. So yeah, it makes me like really sad that most people, a lot of women especially in the world, will never sort of recognize their power and never recognize how incredible they are, literally just because of the environments that they exist within and for no other reason.
Hey, it's Jasmine, and I'm jumping in to interrupt this episode so that I can invite you to an event in New York City. This is our first in-person event. It's taking place on April 7th at 6 p.m. and it's free. We're hosting this in partnership with Shopify, and it is going to be the ultimate evening curated especially for consumer brand founders or really anyone who's entrepreneurial minded and interested in the consumer brand space. I absolutely welcome you and would love, love, love to meet you on the night. There's going to be a structured networking event so that you can meet your people, find other people building amazing businesses without any of the awkwardness. Then we're moving into a panel conversation, and I cannot wait to announce the speakers that we have on the panel. It's going to be awesome. So stay tuned for that detail. We're also going to have free food and free drinks available all throughout the evening, provided by your favorite woman-owned companies. You have heard from a lot of the founders of those brands on this podcast, so it's going to be awesome for you to try them in person. And this is a totally free event, but you do need to register because numbers are limited. Head to our Instagram account at Female Founder World, hit the link in our bio and sign yourself up. I cannot wait to see you there. Let's talk about the early steps in kind of getting a product off the ground or a tech product off the ground. There are a lot of female founders who are listening to this who have an idea for an app. What are you doing to like get your first kind of MVP out there? How does that happen?
I wish I could say I knew. I do now. I wish I could say I knew then. Divya was basically the driving force behind that. So the earliest thing that you need to be doing is testing behavior and testing different things that you think might make that behavior happen. And in the simplest form possible, spend as little money as you physically can to get early signs of the behavior that you're striving for. So there are so many third-party tools and platforms and things out there that you can use to start testing your idea. If you want to build a community, use Slack. If you want to, I don't know, like create content in some way, test the reception to the content in a different format, start a newsletter, just really test your idea in the most basic form before you invest any money in engineering, in building out the product itself. And in the product itself, there's a really good saying, which Divya said to me 1,000 times because I'm a perfectionist, that if you're not embarrassed of your first product, you waited too long. And that is a really solid approach to take when building technology. And it's something that I remind myself of constantly. I'm of the mind where I'm like, why would we release it if it's not beautiful? And
I mean, it is beautiful. It is
yeah,
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, it wasn't until more recently. Yeah, and so I think just really reminding yourself of that is so, so important.
Well, it is. I have to say, like, it is beautiful. I was going to ask about your branding and who you both used for that because it's very distinctive. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to go um, both futuristic and equally nostalgic. And we've actually had a lot of people be like, it kind of felt like I was in a video game from the 90s, but I also felt like I was in 2030. And I'm like, that is exactly what I wanted you to think. So branding wise, really talented designer called Julia. And we wanted specifically to go for someone who had expertise in 3D design, as well as sort of a very thorough understanding around UX and UI and the experiences that users are looking for. She previously worked for Venmo and Slack and all sorts of different massive digital or tech companies, rather. And yeah, she created all of our visual identity, and then we used a 3D designer who helped bring some of their components to life.
With what you're doing, you're building a community at the same time as you're building out a tech product. What are some of the pieces that you have to think about when you're creating that community? Because, I see you in there all the time, like helping to facilitate conversation. How do you build momentum before it can become like its own self-sustaining content platform community?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing when building communities is, and any platform or experience that people are entering into, is you really have to demonstrate the purpose. And you have to, like, anyone could you could give someone a feature and they could go and use it 100 different ways technically. And so you have to start like showcasing how you want people to use the product. And the best use cases for that are the earliest community members. So they can really show, this is how you share your knowledge. This is how you host a conversation. This is how you should structure a conversation, and really be super, super guided both in the community culture that you tell people should exist within Diem, but also in how you then build your features to represent that culture and represent the purpose of your platform. So yeah, it's really just like I always think of it as like a demonstration. Basically, you're demonstrating how to use the product so that other people get the most out of it.
What is the culture that you're trying to shape at DM?
Very good question. There's a number of different things that go into it. One is really just, ultimately, I want you to come into DM and feel as though you don't exist in the real world. And we obviously don't want to be ignorant to the fact that there are so many barriers to entry, certainly for women of color, for non-binary individuals. And so we obviously know that we need to create space that makes them feel more comfortable than they do in the real world. And so I think that that is a lot of what we're doing, is making you feel comfortable, because a lot of the time people don't recognize that they know a lot. And what we say in DM is that we are creating this sort of personalized content discovery platform and economy, really. And a lot of people don't realize what they know. And so you, as a platform, you have to make them realize what they know. And so that starts with, first of all, feeling comfortable. And so your culture has to make people feel comfortable. Second of all, it's making them feel confident once they feel comfortable. So, hey, like, what do you feel most proud of? Like, what book did you read recently? What did you learn at work last week? And starting to get people's wheels spinning in a way where they're like, hang on a second, I know a lot of things. I know my skincare routine. I know my job really well. I give friends advice. I give my friends advice on this the entire time, and starting to make people recognize that their opinions and their lived experiences are valuable. And so that's really what our culture represents.
I want to talk about social audio specifically because Diem is an audio based platform. What was your thinking there about? There are so many different ways that you can like live out that vision and create that culture. Why did you decide to go with audio?
Yeah, we tested all formats. We tested video, we tested voice, we tested written messages. And so right now, like, as you know, you can join or you can host or join live audio, but the purpose of the live audio is really for it to be recorded so that anyone can listen to it post that moment in time. And then the people that join live get this like fun experience, front row seat kind of experience. And so audio was really the place where we saw people becoming more candid. They weren't worried about what they looked like. It felt very much like you were picking up the phone and talking to someone that inspires you or a friend of yours. And we really see what we want Diem to become is scaling the conversations that we all have with each other. And a lot of the time, the conversations that we have behind closed doors, they aren't damning in any way. They're actually incredibly helpful if other people could listen to them. Yet we don't have a place or the incentive to share them anywhere else. And so audio was really the place that we found people sharing the most. And we thoroughly believe that any technology we build should be only built if it makes people feel more comfortable, more confident, or more candid, really. So that's kind of where we chose that. And then we do have the written option too, so people can write notes. And notes are meant to be more of an individual sharing experience. So it's like, hey, I have this really great skincare recommendation, or I love this book, or this is an awesome article I read. I learned XYZ from it. And so it gives you that quick sort of off the cuff way of sharing information, as well as the more intentional space via voice and audio.
I want to shift gears a little and talk about fundraising. Before we started the call, you were saying that you're in the midst of putting together your pitch deck for a seed round. How's that all going?
Well, as of yesterday, we basically finished it. So it's been
Brilliant.
a large number of a couple of weeks of we have some incredible investors from our pre-seed round who have been helping us shape our narrative and just feedback and putting together a pitch deck. As someone who's a marketer and a partnerships person, pitch decks are my favorite thing. I love making decks and putting together a brand message and all of that sort of stuff. But putting together a deck for investors is so different from putting together a deck that would face potential partners or customers, because the language and the way that you're marketing yourself as a business to investors is very, very different. So you're using very different language than you would for a customer. You're pulling all together all the best data and all of the cool stuff that you've done, and then presenting it in a really compelling, visually and also written manner. And a lot of it's a lot of jargon. And I mean, I love jargon, but yeah, it's very different experience. And so it takes a while.
What are kind of some of those data points or metrics that you're kind of pulling together to show that what you've built is working? Like, what are some of those things that investors want to see?
I mean, it's literally open in front of me. I can read it to
Yeah,
you.
let's talk. Yeah, tell me about it.
So I think some of our biggest ones are around the amount of time people are using the platform for. So we have an average of 40 minutes in-app session time, which is huge and really speaks to the need for people or not even the need, just like people's desire to engage in knowledgeable, credible content that is, and they're spoken to very differently in Diem. It's not this whole, you need help, you need this, you need whatever. It's like, you're a capable human being. We're going to talk to you in a way that we know that you want to be spoken to. And that's very refreshing. So I think that shows why we have such high in-app session times, and also just the type of content that exists in there is compelling to our core demographic. We're seeing 50% sort of month over month growth since our beta launch. So that's really exciting. And also our retention rate. So a big thing with tech products is retention. So our retention rate at the moment, it's like sitting over 70% after 60 days, which is really impressive for a beta product. Yeah. And then, amount of content shared is actually my favorite statistic. So we have, I think, over 12 or 15,000 minutes of knowledge that's been shared in the last couple of months, which is really cool.
Very cool. What's the plan? Like, how do you monetize something like Diem?
We want to build an in-app economy. So we align the business interests with the member base interests. So you can earn money from sharing your knowledge. We'll have sort of transaction take rates. There'll be digital goods. Knowledge could become NFTs in a future world. And really, this is the place for you to store your knowledge. Like, your profile in Diem is your knowledge vault. It's where you go and you share what you know and you share what you're learning. And it's your place to reference back to. It's your place that you should earn money passively from what you know.
Have you had pushback as you spoke with investors or like any partners generally, with folks being like, yeah, but Clubhouse, there was the...
Yes. Yeah, I think our biggest thing there is our goal isn't to sort of stay with the format that currently exists. The 30-minute conversations that happen in Diem, we want to build sort of proprietary technology that almost dices up that content in a way that's super digestible and consumable. Believe that millennial and Gen Z content behavior is become like all they want is quick consumable content, and they want a credible way. They want it served to them very personal, like in a very personalized manner as well. And so we believe that it should be as easy to find quick, credible information as it is to find the latest trend on TikTok. And that's really what we're focused on, is like taking the content and the knowledge that's being shared and then pushing it to people in a very personalized way, so that you're never typing in a search bar. You should never have to ask a question to a search bar. Our platform should be so intelligent that it delivers you what you're looking for via a series of questions that we ask you.
That is so fascinating. I could talk to you all day about this. This is really interesting. But the last question that I ask everyone who kind of comes on the show is just to share a resource. So a book or a podcast, something that you've engaged with and that's kind of helped you as you've been building Diem.
Very good question. This isn't really it's not really a business book, but
that's fine.
My favorite book that I've ever read that motivates us to create Diem, we say our mission statement is to close the gender information gap, and one of the reasons for that is this book Invisible Women, which if people haven't read it is unbelievable. It is basically chapter after chapter of the author Caroline writing about research studies from around the world, which essentially highlight that our entire world runs off of the assumption that humans are default male, which if you think about that in reality, it is unbelievable. And the first chapter is basically her diving into the fact that snow plowing is technically sexist. And when I opened it, I was like, oh my God, no, it's not. And I genuinely I was so skeptical about how this was true. By the end of the chapter, I was like, oh my God, it's sexist. What else is sexist? So that I think is such a fascinating book for anyone building products that are designed for people who aren't male. Highly recommend that as reading material. And then otherwise, honestly, the biggest resource, you kind of said it, I can't remember if it's in this recording or before we started talking, is just talk to other people. There are so many people on this journey and they are your best resource. You can read all manner of different business books, but really finding mentors in your friends and your colleagues is what's helped me the most.
That's amazing advice. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Emma.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Hey, did you guys love that? If you did, please drop us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you take a screenshot of that review and DM it to us on Instagram, we will send you back a link with free access to our entire on-demand library of business skills workshops. So don't sleep on that. Get on it. Take that screenshot and DM it over to us. Chat to you later.